Hey guys, today I'm going to take you somewhere unexpected. Not to a museum or some dusty academic library. No, you're going to the sacred paths below Delphi, right where the temple of Apollo rests like a forgotten crown above the earth. It's just after dusk, and the stone glows with a warm gold from the last threads of sunlight. But the real magic is overhead stars begin to shift, not in a slow, poetic way. One of them flickers red, then green, then briefly slides sideways before disappearing behind what looks, to your totally rational brain, like the curved outline of something massive and watching. Careful thaw be the end, you might never see history the same way again. So, before we descend into this strange story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe a bit. Only if ancient secrets and cosmic questions are your thing. Drop your current location and time in the comments. You want to know where on Earth or beyond you're watching from. Now, take a breath, clear your mind, and let's unlock the myths that may never have been myths at all. You descend the cracked steps leading away from the Temple of Apollo, and something underfoot catches your attention. It's not the worn rock that surprises you, it's the symmetry. A narrow groove runs along the center of the path, too clean for erosion, too precise to be ancient plumbing. You kneel, run your hand along it, and it hums. Not loud, more like memory humming, like déjà vu in your fingertips. A slight vibration that's not supposed to be there. You follow it. The track snakes down the mountain, past forgotten shrines, curving like it was laid with purpose, but not by hand. Above you, the temple's remaining columns throw long shadows across the mountainside. One beam of twilight catches a worn relief on the base of a broken statue. It's Apollo, but not the usual lyre holding heartthrob. Here, he's standing inside what looks suspiciously like a capsule. Wings on either side, curved walls behind him, fire beneath his feet. A chariot, sure, but not the horse-drawn variety you were told about in grade school. Mainstream archaeologists will tell you this is artistic license and raise and all that, but fringe theorists have a different take. They think what you're looking at isn't a metaphor, it's a schematic. You pause at the fork in the path. One trail leads to the old stadium, the other doesn't appear on tourist maps. But something about the angle of the starst way Orion tilts above that hidden path pulls at you. You check your phone. Dead. Not battery dead. Glitch dead. The screen is black except for one pulsing icon, a wheel of flame. Funny, that wasn't on there before. You follow the unmarked path. Trees thicken, air cools, and then you see it engraved into the base of a half-collapsed stone wall. The same flaming wheel, but this time etched next to a constellation diagram. Apollo's chariot didn't ride across the sky. It returned on a map trajectoric mythic lap, sensing with star positions not from 500 BC, but from 10,500 BC. The sky back then, a totally different story. Historians still argue whether Delphi's orientation was aligned more with topography or theology. But look deeper and some say the alignment isn't horizontal at all. It's vertical, celestial, as in, something came down. You stand now at what seems like a simple ring of stones, but your eyes adjust. The central circle is scorched, not fire scorched yet heat scorched, as if something hot, metallic, and burning once settled here. Not once, actually irregularly. You crouch, running your hands over the charred earth. A slight indentation in the middle catches your nails. It's shallow, circular, and rimmed with markings in Greek. Not anything human. A repeating pattern of triangles and spirals. Like a code. Like something left behind intentionally. A sudden gust rushes up from below the ridge. Cold. Electrical. You feel your scalp tingle, and the hum returns, this time in your ears. You turn and see, just for a blink, a silhouette at the tree line. Tall, thin, its limbs slightly too long, to bent at the wrong places, and then it's gone. You stand frozen, pulse kicking like a war drum, staring at where it was. But the only thing there now is a faint, glowing glyph on the trunk of a cedar tree. A symbol you've seen before in fresco fragments in the museum, etched into coins, scratched into the base of Apollo's statues. Scholars say it's a staff, a scepter, but it could just as easily be a signal. What if the chariot Apollo drove wasn't a poetic image of sunlight, but a literal vehicle, a ship wrapped in metaphor? And what if the god himself wasn't a god, but a pilot, a commander. You look up. The stars have shifted again. And just like that, the myth begins to feel less like a bedtime story and more like a breadcrumb trail. You stay still a moment longer, watching the stars. That blink of light gone now left a question hanging in the air like static. You feel it in your skin, in your teeth, and most strangely, in your memory, as if something long buried just twitched awake. You walk the rest of the path toward a structure partially swallowed by the hillside. At first glance, it's nothing special, just more ruins. But something is different about the stone here. It isn't chiseled, it's fused, smooth like ceramic, with a texture not unlike volcanic glass. You tap it, no echo. This isn't granite or marblite, feels synthetic, like melted bone and metal woven together. You glance down, and there it is again, the wheel, the flaming, spoked glyph carved into a slab right in front of the entrance. And now it clicks, not metaphor, not symbol, blueprint. Apollo's chariot of fire wasn't a poetic flourish, it was the ancient world's best attempt to describe advanced propulsion. The flames, plasma exhaust, the sun disk above his head, a navigational halo, the horses pulling it, maybe, just maybe, a crude rendering of tethered drones or anti-grav stabilization systems. Laugh if you want, but remember the relief from Heliopolis in Egypt, where Ra rides a bark through the sky, pulled not by oxen or spirits, but something that looks suspiciously like jet nozzles. Historians still argue whether these motifs are metaphor or memory, but look at enough of them side by side, and they start to feel less like myth, and more like classified documentation drawn by the wrong species. You duck inside the partially buried structure, and the temperature drops instantly. Your breath fogs. A hall opens in front of Yaunro, angular, lined with stone pillars that don't match any known architectural order. No Doric, no Ionic, just tall, tapering monoliths that seem to tilt ever so slightly inward, like they're listening. And then the mural, on the back wall, painted with natural pigments faded but still intact, is Apollo again. This time, he isn't holding a lyre. He's reaching upward toward the sky, one hand extended, the other touching a strange consoleno. Not a consolia pedestal. A half-sphere glows in the paint as if alive. Surrounding him are other figures, not quite human. Elongated heads, glimmering skin, thin arms with more joints than make comfortable sense. They're watching him, not worshipping Gidving. This isn't a god receiving praise. This is a commander getting briefed. You step closer, heart pounding. One of the non-human figures is holding something out to Apollo, a kind of orb, patterned with concentric rings and a tiny central dot. Earth, or a device. A handful of scholarsed kind who never get invited to university panels believe these depictions suggest a transcultural contact event, a visitation, not just to one civilization, but many. The Orphic hymns hint that Apollo came not from Olympus, but from a door of stars near the Hyperborean realm, a place always north, always hidden, a metaphor or a cloaked launch point. And in those fringe texts, Apollo doesn't just sing and shoot arrows. He calibrates frequencies. He restores order to vibration. He heals by tuning reality. You walk deeper into the hall and find a small side chamber more like an alcove. At its center is a stone dais, and inlaid into its surface is a metallic plate, not rusted, not corroded, but humming softly. You press your hand to it. For a moment, nothing. Then your vision flickers. The stone around you shimmers, and suddenly, like a stuttering film projector with chamber, changes. It's bright, alive, pulsing with light from hidden sources. The pillars now glow with internal veins. In the center, that same orb from the mural hovers above the dais, and standing beside it is a figurettle, otherworldly, dressed in metallic robes that shift like fluid armor. Its face is blank where a nose should be, its skin faintly blue, and its eyes like twin bronze mirrors. It doesn't speak, but you understand something. It's showing you the chariot, not a horse-drawn cart, but a vessel, sleek, winged, ringed with circular apertures. At its core, a chamber that resonates in tones you can feel more than hear. You blink, and you're back. The plate beneath your hand is cool again. The room is stone once more, quiet, but your pulse is racing like you just ran from a supernova. Mainstream academia doesn't like this part. Visions, hallucinations, Must have been fumes. But here's the thing, across dozens of sites around the world, similar patterns appear. The spinning wheels, the humanoid sky beings, the radiant orbs, the hand gestures, the frequency diagrams. These aren't regional flourishes. They're fragments of a shared memory when we buried under metaphor. You exit the chamber, disoriented, blinking against the starlight. The night has deepened. A wind moves through the ruins, whispering like distant language. And then you hear a sound like wings, but mechanical. Not quite drone, not quite bird. You look up. A series of lights passes over Hadrianger Formation, silent, fast, then gone. You might have imagined it, but maybe not. Because as you stand there, in that spot sacred to a sun god, you can't help but wonder, did Apollo ever truly leave? Or is he still circling just beyond the veil? You don't move for a long time. There's something about standing here where gods once walked, or landed, or hovered that dissolves the boundary between now and then, between Earth and wherever that triangular light just came from. You press forward, past the ruins now cast in shadow, and follow the slope toward a lower plateau. The ground crunches beneath your boots, not gravel, but shards, burned, fused, ancient, glass-like slag, clustered in unnatural patterns. This isn't erosion, it's residue, a signature. Another glyph marks the edge of a fractured column, a circle split by a line. Above it, a spiral, tight and controlled. Beneath it, scattered stars. It isn't just art, it's navigation. The Chariot, as it turns out, wasn't just Apollo's ride. In some of the oldest accounts, fragments scratched into bronze. Barely surviving the Mediterranean humidity, it was called the Skyway, a bridge, a corridor, not through space the way we think of it, but something more elastic, more quantum, more curated. Ancient engineers from Crete to Kush built temples aligned not only to solar positions, but to what they called sun roads. In Greece, these alignments were tied to Apollo's path. But in early Orphic accounts, the god's journey isn't linear. It folds. It disappears from one horizon and reappears on another without crossing the space between. Historians say that's poetic, mythic shorthand, but another group less visible, far less welcome in polite academic circles, proposes something else: wormholes. They point to the temple ruins here at Olympus, the so-called Chariot glyph. Mathematically, it aligns with known principles of toroidal energy distribution. That spiral motif shows up in engineering diagrams across aerospace agencies, both public and secret. Was Apollo's Chariot a plasma field vessel designed to warp spacetime? You step into the center of a large open circle, clearly artificial, once enclosed by pillars now toppled. At the center is a raised stone basin, dry, cracked, but at the bottom, the same symbol you saw glow on your powered-off phone. A jagged bolt, not random, not decorative, stylized to show vector flow, inward, then outward, input becoming propulsion, a feedback system. You stare at it, heart thudding, because suddenly you realize it isn't a symbol, it's a schematic. You crouch, fingertips brushing the shallow groove of the carved bolt, and for a split secondless, then a breath, you hear something. Not sound, not really, a frequency, pure, sustained, then silence. You rise and skim the surrounding stones. One slab bears an inscription, Greek, mostly, but in the middle of the script, etched deeper, in another hand, another era, another originaire, characters you don't recognize. Geometric, sharp, angular curves, not a language made for human tongues. One of the fringe researchers who has since vanished from public life once claimed these characters appeared at known Apollo sites across 3 continents: Greece, Turkey, Peru, each located near places with long records of sky fire, screaming gods, or vehicles that glow like the midday sun. No one believed him, except maybe those who silenced him. You sit on the basin's edge, letting the air wrap around you, cooler now, high-altitude wind, but underneath it a vibration, barely there, like the earth remembering something. They say Apollo could heal with his music, not metaphorically yet literally. His lyre, a frequency tuner, a quantum string manipulator. The notes, harmonics matched to biological coherence. That fringe idea again, that the gods weren't divine in the way we imagine, but technologically so advanced their abilities felt divine. Healing, flight, light manipulation. They weren't magic, they were mechanics. And Apollo wasn't just a passenger, he was a pilot. One image flashes back into your mind, the mural with the tall beings guiding him. What if Apollo wasn't one of them, but chosen by them? A hybrid, a liaison, the one trusted to maintain a connection between worlds. And what if the storiest hymns, the plays, the epics were never written as fiction? What if they were written as instructions? You glance again at the Chariot glyph. Inverted, it resembles something else, a containment ring, not unlike the kind used in magnetic field propulsion. The pieces keep falling into place. You remember that story from earlier about the pilot in 1973 who flew over Olympus during a storm and reported glowing orbs. They dismissed him until two other pilots said the same. Military records marked them as atmospheric anomalies. But you know better now. The summit of Mount Olympus was never just sacred. It was functional. It wasn't just where the gods lived. It was where they landed, where they charged, calibrated, and disappeared, leaving behind only symbols for those who looked backwards hard enough. Which brings you to now, alone on a ruined plateau, staring at ancient stones that pulse with memory, standing where Apollo may have once parked his so-called chariot. And the noni final thing, on the far side of the basin, barely visible in the moss, is a single boot print, but not yours. Too long, too narrow, and not shaped quite like a human foot. You freeze. Above you, a star pulses. Once, then again, then gone. Maybe it's coincidence, but something tells you. You were seen. You stay seated long after the wind picks up, letting the sound of it blur the boundary between myth and memory. The stars above shimmer like cold witnesses, and something deeper stirs in the sky. But inside you, that feeling again, that ancient ache for meaning. This was never about gods throwing lightning bolts or driving flaming carts across the heavens. It was always about contact, connection. The myth was the camouflage, the poetry was the password, and behind it all, a signal, left in stone, etched in pigment, folded into the geometry of temples no tourist ever really sees. Apollo's chariot may have vanished from the skies, but its shadow remains, in symbols that glow when they shouldn't, in ruins aligned not to gods, but to galaxies, in frequencies that only the tuned will hear, and in the silent presence of watchers who never fully left. You rise slowly, casting one last look at the ancient circle, the strange boot print. The night sky no soft with clouds drifting in. You don't need proof anymore, not because belief has replaced evidence, but because the story has already reactivated something inside you. Maybe not memory, but readiness. And as you begin the descent from Olympus, step by step down paths carved long before GPS, one question hums louder than the rest. What if the next time Apollo returns, he's not coming alone? Maybe tonight, the stars aren't looking down. Maybe they're waiting for someone to look back.